Um, let's dip into. I know you say you're not too political, but the 2016 election.
Hmm.
Um, what were your feelings at the time? Did you ever feel like it would get this bad? The country would be this divided. People will hate each other so much. Did we? I for one, I honestly, I'm gonna. I don't know if I'm naive, but I really didn't think it would get this bad. I,
Yeah.
now it's just crazy, you know. Um,
I
I was
think I
reading.
was I think I was afraid right away. I don't know if I had specifics in mind, but I remember you know, just like when I heard the news, worrying about the safety of my loved ones, especially my black and brown loved ones, and just like I don't know, it's kind of terrifying right away. And I immediately was, fearful about violence, fearful about. So it's kind of because I think I was already pretty deep in um, my social justice work. Like I had
Hmm.
been like for a couple years, like really focusing on that and feeling that. Um, so I had no illusions about just how bigoted a lot of people in this country are, and that's really what is ruining our country.
So do you think that's interesting because I've had this discussion with a lot of my friends. Do you think that these racists just popped up out of nowhere, or these are just why now? Like, why are we seeing more of these acts of racism now? Why? We didn't
No,
see
they've
this.
they've always been around. They're just emboldened because, the highest power in the country is like signing off on bigotry. So it's very they have no fear. Whereas
Mhm.
before it was like shameful to be racist. Like we at least got as far as people being embarrassed about being called racist. Those people who would, if you called them out on something, they'd be like, "Oh my God, are you calling me a racist?" And make that sound like that's worse than
Yeah,
whatever you did to them.
yeah,
Those people, they don't care anymore. They don't
yeah.
they don't mind being called racist.
No, it's like a
Um,
racism is like a Boy Scout badge now. You just
yeah,
pin on your
they've
shirt.
always felt that way. It was just a lot more quiet. Like, I mean, people of color are very well aware that racism exists because, like,
Yeah.
even before 2016, because we experienced it. We've experienced this discrimination and hardship and all of this for years. And I mean, the civil rights movement wasn't that long ago. It was like
Yeah, yeah.
it was straight up Jim Crow and slavery really not that long ago. So even that, it's like we know very well that racism is alive. I think the only group that's maybe surprised are like more privileged liberals
Hmm.
because they aren't harboring racist thoughts, and they're also not suffering racist actions. So they were able to live in a bubble. And there are allies. I'm not trying to make them feel bad or anything, but I'm saying like they were the ones who were the most taken aback by like, oh my goodness, I can't believe all these brown people are suffering in this way because they just don't live it every day.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So I actually, so I have an anecdote about, I guess it's about privilege. It's just about how people are like, how can you be so blind to things unless you experience them or you know someone who
Hmm.
does? And so, the person I was with, starting in like 2015, so right before 2016, is 6'3". Um, and we would go and travel and stuff, or we would go to the movie theater, and we'd come out, and I would be like, "Wow, that movie was great," and I would be like, "Oh, I really like the theater." And he would say, "Oh my God, I never want to go there again." And I was like, "Why?" And he's like, "The seats are too close," and I was mushed up the whole time. And that never occurred to me. I'm 4'11". So this is not a problem I have ever had. I'm at the exact opposite end of the spectrum. And then like on airplanes, we would have to buy like, select the seat, make sure there's extra leg room and all of this stuff because he was 6'3". And it was never a problem. Like intellectually, I know big man, little space, not good, right? But until it was affecting my life, it wasn't something that I ever thought about. I never had a second thought when I was going to a movie theater about how comfortable the seats would be. I never paid for extra on an airplane. I just selected whatever seat was free and available. And so it's kind of like it kind of opened up my eyes to like, oh, I see how, privilege can be blinding. Um, but the goal is to not stay there, right? But I also, it kind of helped me as an advocate because I was like, I don't want to demonize people or really go after people who do want to help, right? So like privileged allies. Because I think sometimes, you know, well-meaning activists, especially POC activists, will because we've been so deprived and had so much stolen from us, we want to take ownership of our own movement. 100%, like, and POC should be heading their movement. Their voices should be centered. They should be making decisions. They should be advocating. But, some of them will like yell at allies and not really want them involved. But the thing is, like, a lot of these people, they just really don't know better. They have no better life experience to offer us other than whatever support, and they're learning. And I think the other thing is this idea that people of color like have this homogenous experience, or
Yes,
even
yes,
that
I
black
agree.
people all have a homogenous experience, and it's like I only know what it's like to be me.
Exactly. And a lot of
And
people forget of that. Sorry, continue.
exactly, and all of us, no matter our background, have a duty because we share this planet with other people to learn about the struggles of other people and experiences that are not our own, and to place value on that. So I just try to, keep that in mind and also encourage other people of color to advocate for each other. You know, I know there's a lot of anti-blackness in the Asian community, and a lot of Asians started coming out, after the murder of George Floyd, and they were holding up these signs that said "Asians for Black Lives," and like that's great, you are on the right side, but why do you have to center yourself in this conversation? Why do you have to make it so special that you're Asian? Why can't you just say Black Lives Matter? Why do you have to make it about yourself? And some of them would be like, oh, but it's to encourage other Asians to support Black Lives Matter. And it's like, well, if they aren't supporting it, they're probably racist. So, like I feel like
Yeah.
they don't need, I don't need to check with other Asian people if they approve of things before I do stuff. You know what I mean? Like if it's what's right, it's what's right. There's plenty of information and evidence that should resonate with you as a person no matter your color to be like this is wrong. All of this that's happening and the violence that black people are subject to in America and globally, at the hands of police as well as civilians,
Hmm.
is not right. And because police are a government entity and there's actual policy and change that we can advocate for to remedy that, and they have the most power. That's where the focus has been. But I also don't want people to lose sight of the fact that, like, there are civilians killing black people as well, just racist people, lynchings and stuff. That's not the police.
Yeah.
This is a bigger problem. The
Yeah.
problem is racism. It's not that, we need to make sure the body cameras are always on or we need to make sure there's de-escalation techniques. Like, yes, we need to do that. We need to do that for basic policing of all people. But it's like we need to do something about the racism. I don't know, I'm just
Like,
like getting into it now. You've got me
no,
like
no, no, no. This is no. I get it. To backtrack a bit. Yeah, I had a friend in high school. He was he is a not was a black guy. He didn't change overnight. He is a black guy, and he was dating a Filipino girl, and Filipina.
nah, it doesn't matter.
Um, and the mom was very against it. The mom was very against it. I grew up with a lot of Filipinos, and I know that I feel like the mom is like, she runs stuff in the household. Like they wear the. So the dad actually, they had a good relationship, but he didn't want to cross
The
the mom.
mom.
But I feel like that's actually very common. A lot of my friends are Filipino say that if they're females, like the parents would try to push them to, like, if they're marrying outside of the race, like to marry a white person, or you
Oh
know
yeah.
that's something really. Why do you think that is? And do we have Hollywood to blame for that? Because one thing we
Now we
can
got the
blame.
Spanish to blame for that in that specific instance.
Educate me.
So, the Philippines was colonized by like everyone, but like the Chinese, then the Spanish, then the Japanese, and then the U.S. The Japanese and the U.S. didn't make too much of an impact genetically on the country, um, and Japanese not like culturally also not that much because it was a short time. U.S. I would say they didn't rule the Philippines for a significant amount of time, but culturally, huge
Hmm.
influence on the Philippines today. And um, so it's a country that is a big mishmash of a bunch of cultures, mostly Chinese and Spanish. So in a lot of Spanish, in countries that were colonized by Spain, they had a caste system where, if you were Spaniard, you was the best, and then mestizo is a person who's like half Spaniard, half native. So obviously in Latin America, that's a person who's indigenous, Native American, right? In the Philippines, it would be it could be a Chinese person, but it's a Malayo-Indonesian person. Even Malayo-Indonesian people aren't the true natives of the Philippines. It's just like it's islands, and basically any place in the world with islands and waterways, as you must know, is just like kind of
Yeah.
a free for all because it's so easy to come and go for everyone.
Hmm.
So so there was mestizo, and then my family is torna atrás, which means to go backwards because they are Chinese and Spanish and Filipino. It's like, oh, you were getting better because you're Spanish, but then you had to mess it up by being also Chinese. Like like it's just like a
Oh
very
wow.
racist, yeah, extremely racist. So like, and so here in the Americas, there were other things like mulatto, right, is a
Hmm.
person who is half black, half white. Or there was just like all these different castes. And so in Spanish, the term is mejorar la raza, which is to make the race better. This horrible Eurocentric idea that whiteness is better than, especially blackness, but also, Native American, indigenous. And then in the Philippines, a very similar idea, except with a different kind of native. So that's kind of why a lot of but it's also other Asian cultures that don't have that history of the Eurocentric caste system also feel that way. And that might be because of Hollywood and things like that, where they will try to encourage their children to marry white if they marry outside the race. But I also think the other thing is, I mean, history plays a part in that too, because we had things like Vietnam and Korea and things like that where Americans and Asian people were in close contact, and there were a lot of, military wives in Asia, from soldiers coming, and then I'm sure a lot of women who were sexually assaulted by soldiers as well. So you had a lot of half breed kids come out of that. But also just like immigration patterns, and then Asians have they Asians have been oppressed in the Americas, but they've always relatively had, different privileges. And so it's kind of easier for Asians to, end up marrying white people versus Latino or black people because their families want them to grow in privilege, and they're in spaces where they recognize that the white people have more privilege. Um, but I think it's changed a lot now because
Yeah.
in cities where it's really diverse, you have a mix, and I think more people are open minded. I certainly, it's been, I don't know, a while since I've been with a or even attracted to a person who is just white. Um, Even though I have had relationships with white men.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I haven't really had too many relationships with Asian men. So I'm definitely somebody who dates like outside my race, but I think that a lot of Asian people date other Asian people or
Yeah.
white people, and I mean some of that is definitely racism. There's a lot of anti-blackness that is harbored in Asian culture.
Yeah. In the end, though, going back to my friend, it worked out because the mom came around, and
Oh,
she realized that he was an awesome guy. There was nothing. At first she tried to find stuff, and she's like, "Wow, I really can't find anything wrong." And they went on to have a really good relationship. Um,
that's great.
yeah, no. So, have you when have you said that you've been in a few interracial relationships before?
Yeah. Like
Did have you received any blowback from the family? From
um
your family, I mean, not
I don't really care what my family thinks because I'm not really close to my family. So I don't think I really care. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I never introduced anyone to my mom, and I've only introduced one person to my dad, and he was great. So wasn't like, yeah, I don't know. I don't think anyone else would care. And I feel like
hmm
my family members that I'm close to are my first cousin and my sister, and they're super woke. They don't care. They're like really into whatever. I don't know. They don't care.
All right. I want to ask you something. So obviously, the Black Lives Matter movement has gained a lot of traction and support in the wake of the murder of George Floyd. Why do you think BLM, Black Lives Matter, poster, commercial, whatever it may be, triggers so much of America?
It's
And
because
why is
they're
the response always all lives matter? And do you think, there's a two-part, I'm going to hit you with a two-part. Do you think that all these people are prejudiced people, or like if do you look at somebody who says all lives matter, if that's their response, do you automatically look at them like, oh, this person's a racist, or do you think it's just more complex than that?
it depends. I've seen some people who it sounds like they mean to be supportive of Black Lives Matter genuinely. I've seen a couple people on Facebook where I'm like, this person isn't saying no, Black lives do not matter, all lives matter. This person just thinks that they just don't understand. They think it's an issue of semantics rather than politics and social climate. Like they don't understand the context. So they'll be like, no, but it's better if all lives matter. And I think some of that is like rooted in, like the democratic, like a democracy and an individualistic society, a capitalist society, all of these things that are huge, aspects of our culture. It's like we want to believe all people are created equal, is like everybody is treated the same, every vote has the same weight, but that's not what's happening. That's just a theory. That's not what's actually happening, right? And so a lot of these people, and I mean even super racist people, like to say that they believe in those ideas in the country, but of course in action they don't think that all people are created equal because they're racist.
Yeah.
They just like it as far as they think it applies to them. So there are people who believe all lives matter because of that. But if they have any sort of, idea of social context, and most people do, that other group is in the very small minority, like 5% of the people who say all lives matter. All of the other ones are racist. Like it's like the word black is clearly triggering to them, and it's just anti-blackness, it's racism, and they don't want to acknowledge it. That's why that phrase is triggering, because it calls out very specifically that this country does not conduct itself with that truth, that Black Lives Matter, which is not even an ambitious statement,
hmm
just that they matter, and they don't even want to concede that. It's just racist.
Yeah, no, Yeah, you're absolutely right. Or when you have the people saying, racism doesn't exist, or there's no such thing as, systemic racism, and et cetera, et cetera. I don't think, I think people need to just take a step back, listen, digest it, and then maybe come back out and, and have that conversation. People are just too quick to react, you know? You need, if you want to evolve as a person, I know I try to be a better person every day. You need to really listen to other person. And I have people that I totally disagree with, but I'm so interested in their point of view because I don't want to be surrounded with people who have the same point of view as me because I don't think that promotes growth. I like, because it challenges me, even people that, think and feel the opposite of me, because maybe I'm thinking a way that I'm like, you know what, that's actually kind of wrong, and you help me see the light. So I know I was reading the mission statement for In Full Color, right? And you were talking about authentic representation, right? So why do you think in media, and especially Hollywood, it's so underwhelming? You'll have a white guy playing a Mexican, or how hard is it to just go catch just so many Mexican actors that you can know so many great Mexican? Why do you think it's so underwhelming in Hollywood? What is it?
It's that the people at the top are white. And so you have producers, you have directors and writers. The people who are creating are white. And so people of color need to have their own spaces and have creative control because, you don't have to look too far to realize that people of color are props to these people. I mean, we have the Washington Redskins, right? Like, obviously they think that Native Americans, indigenous people are, mascots, are these braves, these savages, these chiefs, all of these things. They're treated like animals. They're in the same category as, like jaguars and things like that. And like I think the only other human mascots are things like cowboys or pirates, but those are specific lifestyle choices that make that makes sense that would be a mascot. A cowboy is a person of skill who rides horses and things like that. A pirate is a person who makes the choice to steal things and be on boats or whatever. And it's like, it's not just about, I was born into being a redskin. It's not a mascot. That's like, you're treating them like animals. Yeah, where was I going? Where was I going? Oh,
I
the
actually,
representation. Yeah.
yeah.
Um, they, don't understand the full lived experience of people of color. It's something that they don't take the time to get to know or learn about. And it's obviously not something they're exposed to because that's the problem we're trying to address anyway. So they have no investment in it. And then when they decide that they want to get some of that, Latin market or that black market or Asian or whatever, and they put a brown body on the screen, they don't know how to write for that person. So they're going to resort to
True.
stereotypes or have
True.
roles that are just really not fleshed out or fulfilling. But it's like POC, no, we have full lives. We experience all of the same emotions. We experience all of the same things. And, our lived experience, it doesn't even have to be, you don't need to have me showing something really specific to my experience on screen, but just show me as a human, And I really I think our goal is really to achieve both, like, yes, we want more authentic stories about, say, what it's like to be a Hispanic immigrant, right? Coming to the country, learning the language, doing all the stuff that you need to do to survive. Or, I'm trying to think of something else. Or what is it like being Muslim after 9/11, right? Like, see, all of these, like, very specific, heritage-specific storylines. Those are great if they're well done and authentic to the experience. But I also, I just want to see, a black woman falling in love, a black woman as a spy, I want to see a road trip movie with POC where they're just like they're taking a road trip. It's about friends. Like
Hmm.
where are all these movies? And it's like you only really see it when POC are, you know, in the writer's room and they have creative control, and that's when you see that representation. So I just need to see more of that. We need to get more people at the top.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree, but I do think that Hollywood is trying to rectify the
They're
sins of the
trying.
past now. So at least they're on the right track. Um, Talking about authentic representation, I want to shift over to cultural appropriation. Now, what is your definition of cultural appropriation?
So I think cultural appropriation is when a dominant or more privileged culture takes an aspect of a less privileged culture and uses it and then, either usually like tries to take credit for it or hijack it or glamorize it, but only in the context of its use for the dominant culture. So I think it's more complicated than it's not just borrowing or assimilating culture,
Hmm.
right? Like I'm not culturally appropriating by listening to black music. It's but if I am like let's say a white person and I do start if I decide that I'm going to be a rapper and I start um, kind of mocking black culture, even if I think I'm paying homage to it, kind of taking these assets and glamorizing them in the context of my whiteness and not uplifting where it was born in blackness and honoring those roots. I think cultural appropriation is not people get caught up in like the specifics of what is being appropriated. It's an attitude ultimately.
Yeah, ex- that beautifully put. Right, that right there, I think is what it is. But what the problem is. We have so many people. Obviously we all have our perspectives, but you have so many people, especially on social media, um, part of the cancel culture that get to decide that you have a small minority that are deciding what the definition is for all of us.
Yeah.
And in some situations, it's blatant. The no homage paid and everything. Some situation, they just, I think it was I forgot. I think it was an actress. She was in traditional Chinese garb, and they cut her down. And she's just like, I love Chinese culture. Like so, I was something like that. Instead of you should take the time to explain it to that person. Instead of cutting them down. Explain first, cut them down later. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
I think it depends, like, what is that person's relationship with that culture outside of the act of appropriation? Is there any respect? Is there an attempt to make homage? Or is it like, I do believe also that, like, as I'm an artist, I believe that you can be like, wow, I really like Chinese dresses. I'm gonna take something new and create fusion with it, and make I don't know, like a 17th century corset using Chinese silk, right? Like you're innovating on it. There's all of these things where, and I think there are some things like the things that I think are most easily shared are food and music. Um, are like that has the most um, potential for cultural exchange, right? And I
yeah,
think you can, you know, appreciate things, but you do have to think about respecting the origins of whatever cultural thing you have. So, like, there was a restaurant that was trying to offer clean Chinese food, and it was just done with this attitude of like being totally condescending, basically calling Asian restaurants dirty, all of these, pretty racist ideas
hmm,
were reflected in that branding. But, learning how to make Chinese food isn't inherently bad. Like, you like Chinese food and you decided to learn how to cook it. That's great. Continue eating Chinese food, cooking Chinese food. But, taking this and trying to make money off of it, taking money away from the people of color who created it and then deriding them, not paying any real homage to your, that's not good. That's cultural appropriation. And I really think it's case by case. I think it's case by case, but I think it's not even, I don't even think it's case by case as far as the act of appropriation. Like I'm saying, what it is based on who the appropriator is. If
Hmm.
it's, like if it's a person who's racist, a lot of their different acts of appropriation are all going to be cultural appropriation. Whereas, like, if a person who is more or less an ally or whatever it is just doesn't realize that they're, doing something, or I don't know how to explain, but like they do one or two things that some people might find appropriative, but it's an outlier for them, like it doesn't fit into a pattern or an attitude, then I'm willing to be like, okay, maybe not cancel this person yet. Let's see what else this person does. Yeah, I guess that's how I feel about it.
No, I definitely understand, and I think that was very well put. So what's in the future for In Full Color? What's next?
Geez, what is next? So we are working on our annual show. So that we have women from around the country submit monologues and poems. And this year we're doing it all virtual, which is going to be really cool because we're going to be actually able to hopefully work with some of the women who've been in our program before, but who were not able to perform because our show is in Jersey City. So we have women in, I think, 8 states, 8 to 12 states, I don't remember, a bunch of states who have been part of In Full Color. And we've had it where like writers will submit something and then we find an actress of a similar background who is local here who will perform it. And that's been excellent and really wonderful. But I'm excited to see what some of these people do when they can actually perform their own work.
Yeah, that's awesome. I was about to ask you, how difficult is it? Due to the pandemic, you had to shift everything around. Like, how has that affected In Full Color and your agenda?
Um, in some ways, it's been challenging, but in other ways, it's actually been really empowering because we, have always been working to serve artists around the country, and we're open to working with people around the globe as well. And we've worked with some people in like Canada and stuff. Um, and it's just like a little easier now that it's virtual. Now there are no barriers. And even local people have fewer barriers because they don't have the same commute. We always had some people who were like, "Oh, I want to support, but I won't be back from work until whatever. I'm gonna miss the show or whatever it is." And now it's like, well, their work ends at a certain time. They just like, log on and they can see us right away. They can view recordings. So that is great. Like the access is wonderful. It's not perfect. There's definitely some people who don't have access to technology that we would like to serve, and it's really hard to bridge that technology gap for obvious reasons. Um, and then there's some things where we're going to be exploring how to like really make virtual performance exciting and innovative and artful. And that's a challenge I'm looking forward to, but it's also definitely something where it's a new concern.
Yeah, I would have loved, I would have loved to see these performances up close. I just think that's like a whole new experience. It's kind of like streaming versus going to the movie theater. Like I'm a movie theater guy. Like I like going to the theater, looking at the screen. So, but it definitely has its advantages, being virtual. And I tuned into, what day did I tune in? Was that Thursday?
I
I It
think
was a
so.
Thursday. I had a lot of fun. I think what you're doing is amazing. I told you before, and never stop.
Thank
People like you, when people talk about role models, talk about people like you. What you're doing
Oh,
is great. So keep up the
thank you
good
so
work.
much. Thank
Um,
you.
Thanks for sitting down with me. Maybe we can make this a regular thing, like once a month. Catch up on the news, or talk about everything. Inform us what's going on in Full Color. And yeah, what do you
Yeah,
think?
definitely. I would love to come back. And I hope you can come to actual info colors. So it's going to be October 8th and October 9th.
Sweet. So wait, is that gonna be that's okay. So that's gonna be Jersey City, and that's gonna be virtual
That's gonna be
or
virtual.
okay,
Virtual,
cool.
so everyone can see it. So hopefully we'll be working out the details on that very soon, but it's gonna be October 8th and October 9th.
All right, awesome. Yeah, so definitely, I'm gonna share the link down below to everything, and help spread the word. But again, thank you.
Thank you.